common problems or mistakes that projects face is that they set a target that's just either too low because they haven't, they underestimate the project, or that's too high and it's hard for them to reach it. So it's important that you set a target that's realistic and reasonable, and only when you've got some sort of measure on which to look at will you get the opportunity to work that out. And then it's important to think about how long you're going to run the campaign for. There's a common misconception that if you run it for a longer period that you're going to raise more money. That will actually just mean that you'll have longer quiet period between the first week and the last week. As a general rule, most campaigns kind of have buzz at the beginning and buzz at the end. So it's important to give yourself enough time to get the word out, but not let the campaign drag on too long. So, think about the size of your network, the different ways that you're going to sell or talk about your project, the kind of ask that you're going to do on different kinds of platforms, and give yourself enough time to do that and do that well and not inundate people, and then give yourself a little bit more time. It's always good. You are awesome, definitely, but it's always good to give yourself a little bit more time, because people get distracted easily on the internet. There's lots of cat videos to watch. There's lots of email to ignore. People will invariably, it'll take a while to get that information to people. So give yourself a little bit more time than you possibly initially anticipate. Generally, most campaigns run for between 40 and 50 days, and that seems to be a fairly good amount of time for most projects. Okay, so how did our case studies deal with budgets and targets and these kinds of things? So Amanda Palmer, she was going for the fairly modest price of $100,000 US. It's a fairly significantly high amount given most crowdfunding campaigns, particularly in Australia. But she knew it was a fairly high amount of money that she was going for, even though she has a fairly big network. So she gave herself a little bit more time than most projects do. So she ran a 60-day campaign. In that period, she got just under 25,000 pledges, and she raised 1.19 million US. Sorry. So that's not to say that every project that engages in crowdfunding is going to raise 1.1 million, but it's an interesting sort of stat, and I guess one of the most well-known crowdfunding campaigns at the moment. Emerging Writers Festival, slightly more modest target. They were going for 4,000 Australian, and they knew because basically, and we'll go into this in the reward section, but because part of their reward structure was essentially a pre-sold ticket, basically if they didn't sell enough tickets, the event wasn't going to happen. So there wasn't as much of a need to have a really long campaign period, so they capped it at 3 weeks, 21 days. They had 100 pledges in that time period, and they got just over the target that they were looking for.
So this next section we felt was really important because there are a lot of crowdfunding information sessions going on at the moment. They're largely being run by crowdfunding businesses themselves. So we wanted to come